Hey guys, it's Miss Demetrio. Today we are going to do our word work, and our goal today is to talk about 4 Latin roots. So let's go ahead and talk about what those roots are on our next slide. So the first root word we're talking about is odd. Now, A-U-D, odd, means to hear, as in the word audio. The root word odd is in the very beginning of the word audio, as in the audio is too loud in this movie. The second root word we're going to talk about is vis, as in see. An example of vis is visual, which you see the root word in the very beginning of the word. An example sentence is, I drew a visual diagram to show my thinking in math. So the first word we're talking about is odd, as in to hear, and vis, as in to see. The third word, root word we're talking about is form. Form, as you may have guessed, means shape, as in conform. An example sentence is, I need to make sure my math visual conforms to the rules. And the last root word we're going to talk about is seed. Seed is also spelled C-E-E-D. It's commonly spelled C-E-D-E. It's also spelled C-E-E-D. These both have the same meanings. Both seed and seed mean go or yield, as in precede. An example of this is, we are ready to listen, so you may proceed with your speech. These are the 4 words we're going to be talking about. Again, odd, to hear, vis, to see, form, to shape, and seed, go or yield, with the alternative spellings, which both mean go or yield. So let's look for some examples in the story we read earlier this last month, called The Pagoda on the Hill of the Imperial Springs. I'm not going to read the entire thing, but what I am going to do is I'm going to show you some examples of the Latin root words we're talking about in this story we've already read. After we've found some examples from this story we've already read, I am going to let you know what your practice is going to be. Now, in the very beginning of this story, I'm going to zoom in so you can see it as best as you can. We're looking at paragraph 1 of the story, and we have a few examples to look at. Now, I'm going to read this one paragraph because this one paragraph has 2 examples of words that have 2 of the root words we're going to talk about. One of the root word we talked about was A-U-D, odd, meaning here. And there's one example of this in our paragraph that we are going to look at. The second root word we're going to see an example of in this paragraph is vis, as in to see. So go ahead and follow along with me. I will have this handy dandy little red spotlight tool so you'll know where I'm reading and when. Alrighty. A drought and its cause. While everything was thus tranquil in the new city of Peking, a sudden and untoward event occurred that spread dismay and consternation on all sides. One day, when the Prince of Yen went into the hall of audience, okay, I'm going to pause here. We found one example. I've already underlined the root word, but the entire word is audience. Audience is a group of listeners, and the root word odd, A-U-D, means to hear. So it makes sense that in the hall where the audience, whose job is to listen, is that the word audience is used, and A-U-D means to hear. An audience is a group of listeners whose job is to hear. The root word gives us a really good clue of the definition. But also, there are other clues with context clues in this sentence that helps me figure out what the word audience means. I'll go ahead and highlight those clues in green. So any clues that you're going to see me highlight will be in this green color. Alrighty, so it says the Prince of Yen went into the Hall of Audience. One of his ministers reported. Well, if someone's reporting something, then that means somebody else is listening. We don't report things to an empty wall, right? So one clue that I see here is reporter. The minister is reporting in the Hall of Audience. In the hall where the entire job of the people in there is to listen, the minister is reporting something. So I see this as a clue that helps me figure out what the word audience means. If the ministers are reporting this into the entire hall, it would make sense that it's not empty and instead is full of people who are listening. So this handy dandy clue kind of helps understand what this means. So that's one. Let's skip a little bit and read the sentence that the next word is in. The prince at once called his counselors together to devise some means of remedying this disaster and causing the water to return to the wells and springs. All right, so we already have the word devise. The root word vis inside of this word is already underlined. So this is another word. Let's figure out what devise means by using context clues and what we know of the Latin roots. Now, let's look for clues to start. It said, the prince at once called his counselors. I think the fact that he called his counselors is a clue, because if you're going to call counselors, you're probably going to ask for help to figure something out, because that's generally the job of a counselor. So I think one clue we have is the counselors. And then it continues to say, some means of remedying this disaster. Let's see. So it looks like there's a big old problem he's trying to solve, and he needs help from his counselors to do that. So if we have a big old problem to solve, that might be another clue that we need in order to understand the word devise. So a counselor's job is to help. And after the word devise, it says some means of remedying this disaster. So I know that counselors help. I know that if there's some sort of a disaster, then that means that there's been a problem that needs to be solved. Now, if you are the prince and it is your job to solve problems and you're talking to your counselors about a problem, you need a plan. So I know the word devise has something to do with a plan. Maybe with the help of the counselors, the prince will be able to see a different solution to the problem at hand. So, the word devise here means to help see a solution. And with the context of this story, the prince is going to work with the counselors to help and see a solution to this disaster he is trying to fix. So far, we've seen examples of two different Latin roots. We see ad as in audience. We see vis as in devise. And we know what the words mean. Ad is to hear, vis is to see. This example was from the first page of this story. We're going to continue. Now, on this page, I saw another example in paragraph 7. So I'm going to zoom in just to paragraph 7. I'm not going to reread this entire story because we've all had it read. Now, in paragraph 7, it says, I'm going to read the first sentence only of paragraph 7. It says, The two dragons then transformed themselves into an old man and an old woman, went into the chamber of the prince who was asleep, and appeared to him in a dream. So that's the first sentence of paragraph 7. In the first sentence, I see the word transform. And in that word, I see the root word form. Now, form means shape. And we're talking about two dragons that literally changed into an old man and an old woman. So what we mean by shape in this context is, I think, a little bit more clear with the context of we're starting with two dragons, right? They transform themselves into an old woman and an old man. So we have two different clues on this page. Two dragons transformed into an old man or an old woman. I know that the word form means shape. So with the context in this sentence, how can we use our knowledge of the root word form, meaning shape, to help us understand this sentence? Well, form means shape. Dragons turned into a man and a woman, so the dragons changed. If I know that the word form means shape, then I know that the word transformed probably means to change shape. I got shape from the root word, and I got change from the context in this sentence, which I circled. So you've seen 3 examples now of how I use my root word knowledge in order to help understand the word and what's going on in the sentence. We're going to keep doing that. Alrighty. Now our last root word example is on the next page. So I'm going to skip ahead to the paragraph that has that. It's not on this page. It's on this page. I'm going to zoom in to the paragraph 12, page 18. And we see the example of another example of a root word we have not discussed yet in the very last sentence of paragraph 12. So I'm just going to read this one right here, and that's it. It says, "Hereupon the priest recited a short prayer or a spell, and the waters receded as rapidly as they had risen, and finally returned to their proper channels." Now, we already know where the root word is because I underlined it in red. Seed, the root word C-E-D-E, again, can also be spelled C-E-E-D. In this case, it was spelled C-E-D-E. Now, either of these roots both mean go, both mean yield. In this example, we see C-E-D-E. That means go or yield. The whole word is reseeded. We know that somehow means go. So let's read the entire sentence in order to look for clues that might help us understand what the word receded means. Hereupon the priest recited a short prayer or spell, and the waters, this gives me context. We're talking about the water again, which is the goal of this entire story. The Prince of Yen accidentally lost the water in his lands. We know that's what this whole story has been talking about. So now we have some context from so far. We have at least a little bit of context. What's receding? Well, the waters are receding. And we know that because it says it right before the word recede. Now let's keep reading to see if there's any more clues to help us understand what's going on. The waters receded as rapidly. Well, I know from my background knowledge that rapidly means fast. So this is saying the waters receded as fast as they had risen and finally returned to their proper channels. So they went back. The waters receded meant they returned to their proper channels. So in this sentence, I know that the word receded means to go to their proper channels, because the context clues from the rest of this sentence really helps me understand that. What receded? The waters did. And it tells me right before the word receded. What does receded mean? It means to return or go to their proper channels. In other words, it means to go back to where they were supposed to be in the first place. So I was able to use the context clues from the sentence I found the word in, and my understanding of the Latin root seed, which means go or yield, to help me understand that the word receded means to go back. In this case, the waters needed to go back to where they had originally come from, to go back home, so to speak. Now, that is the last example of our 4 root words. You are going to be looking for our 4 root words in a different story, and I'm about to assign that to you. But as one last example, I want to remind you again, here are the 4 root words. Form means shape. Seed, spelled 2 different ways, means go or yield. Odd means to hear. Viz means to see. Now, we read through selections of the pagoda on the hill of the Imperial Springs in order to show you what it is like to use our understanding of Latin roots and clues in the story to understand what is being said. We realized that odd means listen, and if ministers are reporting to a great hall, that probably means the audience's job is to listen, because odd means to hear. We saw viz, we saw how the root word form and transform literally tells us change shape, and that is the meaning. And on the very last page of the story, we talked about how the root word seed and some fantastic clues from the context of the sentence helped us to understand that receded meant to sort of go back in some way. Now, I want you to practice these skills on your own. Here is your assignment. Number 1, you are going to read Why the Oceans Have Tides from page 20 in your benchmark booklet. You are going to circle 2 words per root word. There's 4 root words. So really, your job is to circle 8 words so that you give me 2 examples of words that have the root words we studied today for a total of 8 words circled total on page 20. So you're going to read Why the Oceans Have Tides and circle 8 words. You should be able to find 2 words that have each root for a total of 8. Step number 2, after you're done reading Why the Oceans Have Tides and circling 8 words, the next thing you're going to do is use what you know about the root words. I told you the definition, so use what you know about the root words, as well as context clues, like you saw me underline or circle in green. You're going to use your understanding of root words and context clues from the sentences you find these words in order to make a guess. It does not need to be perfect. I need to know why you guessed that by your annotations on your page. And make a guess based on facts about what each of the 8 words you circled mean. Write your guess on the side of the page. I'm going to go back a little bit to remind you. That's what I did right here. I found the word receded, and then on the side of the page, I wrote what I thought was the definition based on context clues that I underlined in green. So I found context clues and my knowledge of Latin roots, and I am able to use that to say recede equals go back. Is this definition perfect? No. Did I go to dictionary.com to find this definition? No. But on my paper, I underlined the clues I used to help figure out that recede essentially means to go back. Maybe it's more complicated than that, but the context clues and what I know of the Latin root told me that most likely the word recede means to go back. So that's an example of how to do step number 2 and what that looks like. Step 3, on Flipgrid, you're going to share your work. Tell us 2 of your words by telling us what 2 words you chose, so 2 words, and then tell us what you think each of them meant. So I need the words, I need the definitions. Then you're going to summarize what the story on page 20, which is actually a tale, it's called Why the Ocean Have Tides. You're going to summarize that story. What happened in this story? Just a brief summary is fine, and then complete the handout. Alrighty. That is everything you are going to do. Good luck, and I can't wait to see what you learned.